A report has come out indicating Masai Ujiri's job is not as secure as it once was, and he knows it. And this report is not coming out of nowhere, as there's been some power changes at MLSE, the organization that governs the Toronto Raptors, and a man that didn't even want to bring Masai Ujiri back when his contract previously expired. He's getting a lot more power. So we'll discuss this entire situation, including Gary Trent Jr.'s name being brought up in a report that might give us some insight in terms of a contract extension. We'll discuss that, including Gradey Dick getting a sponsorship. So lots of stuff to break down, but before we do, we have a very exciting announcement, as this video is brought to you by Rentals.ca. Rentals.ca is Canada's largest apartment hunting network. They have the most rental listings all across the country. You can rent apartments, houses, condos, whatever you want, you can find it, whether you're in Toronto, Calgary, Montreal, Vancouver, Ottawa, Winnipeg, Halifax, St. John's, wherever it is, coast to coast, you can find it. Their website is clean, extremely easy to use. You can just pinpoint your exact neighborhood where you're looking to rent, where you're looking to find your ideal place, and Rentals.ca will have you covered. They have the most listings across the country in their network, and you've probably seen their billboards across your city, across your neighborhood, indicating different rental spots. So shout out to Rentals.ca. The link to their website is in the description, as well as the pinned comment of this video. And great folks over at Rentals.ca, Raptors fans themselves. So if you're looking for a place to rent, Rentals.ca has you covered big time. And, it's always good to support other Toronto Raptors fans. So shout out to Rentals.ca for supporting the channel. It means the world over here. But we have a report coming out that has me a little bit shook, has me a little bit cheesed. And it's Masai Ujiri's job not being secure, according to David Thorpe. So as I mentioned in the introduction of this video, Masai Ujiri, he's been a guy that, sure, he hasn't lived up to his usual standards in the past couple seasons, especially with the Toronto Raptors. The tank here, I'm not blaming on Masai, but, letting some star players walk, not having a clear direction on the future, all these types of things. I get the criticism, but basically, David Thorpe came out on his True Hoop podcast and said that he's been told that Masai Ujiri's job isn't as secure as it once was, and that he recognizes it. And David Thorpe is a guy that has broken some stuff regarding Masai Ujiri in the past, so it's not something that is a complete nothing burger. But the thing, and generally I would refer to something like this as something that's a nothing burger, and I indicated this about Nick Nurse. That was my stance, my opinion. I didn't think the Raptors would end up firing Nick Nurse, so, it's tough to really gauge when things are bad, when your team is losing, but Masai Ujiri is a guy that took this organization that was a dumpster fire for decades, right? We barely had winning seasons at all, right? And he took a squad that was really mid, that was bottom tier, bottom caliber, and made us a perennial Eastern Conference contender. And then when LeBron James left, we ended up winning an NBA championship. And even following that, we had a great season in the bubble. Sure, things weren't great, but even not this most recent season, but the season prior, we overachieved. We got some good young talent, made some good draft selections. Masai Ujiri hasn't, made us a championship contender by any means after the one that we had, but hasn't been downright brutal, hasn't been downright horrendous. So, given his past history, and he experimented, he tweaked some things that didn't work out. Personally, I don't think it makes sense for Masai Ujiri to end up even having to contemplate, having to understand, to be aware that his job isn't super secure. But basically, I don't think it's just the decision making, it's just the things going on, letting Fred VanVleet walk or something like that, that's leading the Toronto Raptors to contemplate his future with the organization, as there's some stuff happening amongst MLSE that's likely driving this narrative. It's basically Larry Tannenbaum, who's a guy that has been backing Masai Ujiri for years. He's close to selling part of his share of MLSE holdings at $8 billion valuation, selling it to, I believe, a pension fund in Ontario or something along those lines. So basically, Larry Tannenbaum is selling a part of his stake of MLSE. And Tannenbaum is a guy that, especially come extension times for our front office folks, he's been adamant about wanting to keep Masai Ujiri, bring him back. But there's another man amongst ownership, a powerful man that isn't that high on Masai Ujiri, that would likely be getting a lot more power with Tannenbaum gone or sort of out of the picture, more so. Not completely out of the picture, but selling a big stake of his ownership, as Edward Rogers is a guy that owns Rogers Media, owns the Blue Jays, all these types of things. Reports have come out that he wants to sort of monopolize Toronto sports, be the head honcho, be the guy running the show in TO, and that's I've seen some people supporting his take now in the past, given some of the misses Masai Ujiri has made in recent seasons. But basically, Edward Rogers back, Masai Ujiri's last contract extension, I believe it was 2021. Edward Rogers fought plans to keep Masai Ujiri, but was thwarted by the MLSE head, sources have said. So basically, Rogers said the team could be managed without Masai Ujiri, give Bobby Webster a higher role, and demanded right to spin MLSE's stake into a separate company in return for approving the contract for renewal. So basically, Edward Rogers did not want to bring Masai Ujiri back. Some people say it was a chess move. They knew that the rest of the board wanted to bring Masai Ujiri in and he could get some more power, could make some business plays if he sort of forced his hand and said, hey, I'll only accept this if you give me a little bit more power, let me spin off my own company, all these types of things. But regardless, he's not the tightest man with Masai Ujiri. He was cool with sort of letting him walk. Masai Ujiri definitely is expensive. That was something he brought up in an interview. It's all business stuff, and he said he's happy that he's there after the fact, but tried to snake Masai Ujiri out of his role at a moment of time when there was no indications. Masai Ujiri was basically as perfect of a front office man in the NBA as you could be. So, that was shocking. That put Edward Rogers on a lot of Raptors fans' frustration lists or whatever you want to call them. And basically, he's going to have a lot more power in MLSE with Larry Tannenbaum out of the mix. Sure, there's the pension fund, all these types of things. Edward Rogers' goal is to get more power in the Toronto sports scene. And if he doesn't feel like Masai Ujiri should be around the Toronto Raptors, he could probably make it happen with Tannenbaum out of the mix. So, personally, again, I think it'd be an L for the Toronto Raptors to get rid of Masai. He's a guy that's, over the course, in aggregate and everything that he's done, been a genius for the Toronto Raptors. Yes, the 6'9" vision didn't work out that well. We still had to shake things up, letting a few of our star players, which I think has been a narrative ran with way too much. After the championship season, we let Kawhi walk for nothing, Danny Green walk for nothing, Lowry, Serge Ibaka, Marc Gasol, all these types of things. I mean, look at it in context. And heck, I'm going to dive into it. Kawhi, what do you want to do? Trade him midway through that season? Should we have traded Kawhi Leonard midway through the year that we ended up winning an NBA championship? No, that would have been insanely, absurdly foolish. So, Kawhi walked is not on Masai. It's a W for Masai to take that risk and win us a championship. Danny Green was going with Kawhi, so, you had Norman Powell. A lot of people didn't want to bring Danny Green back on that sort of contract, so those two guys, I don't see the frustration in. I don't see a lot of people getting shook up about. You look at Serge Ibaka, Marc Gasol walking, and yes, those two were great in their final seasons with the Toronto Raptors. Slowed down a little bit, were great, but what did they do after they left the Toronto Raptors? Absolutely nothing. Marc Gasol was out of the league within half a season. Serge Ibaka was bouncing around from team to team. They took a major leap back after they let two of those guys walk, and obviously Marc Gasol, Serge Ibaka are two guys that I love dearly. I wish we're still on the team, wish we're still in the Toronto Raptors, heck, even if they were old, but you can't blame the Masai Ujiri for not wanting to give a massive contract to either of those two dudes. And Kyle Lowry, of course, is the one that could be regarded as a little bit of a fumble because, we had the opportunity to trade him during the Tampa Tank season, but we did still get value back in regards to Precious Achiuwa, who I think is a player that still has a lot of potential. The jury's still out in terms of how good or bad that return was, but that's the one maybe you feel like, the Raptors could have got more of a return. There's talks that maybe Maxey could have been involved in a deal at the deadline. That could have seriously been a fumble. But Fred VanVleet also is a guy that everyone on here has been like, hey, Fred VanVleet, we need to let him go for nothing, cut our losses, all these types of things. And he got paid a ridiculous contract. Masai Ujiri made the right move by not matching that wild offer that Houston Rockets sort of gave to Fred VanVleet along those lines. So, did a little deep dive there, went on a little bit of a tangent, but the criticism Masai Ujiri's received, yes, he should be criticized when he makes a poor move, all these types of things, but, Masai Ujiri knows a lot better than us as fans and all these types of stuff. When things don't work out, we have to talk about it, bring it up on videos, bring it up wherever the heck you want to rant about the Toronto Raptors, but don't be going on fire Masai Ujiri until he does something crazy, until he does something wild, because Masai is that guy. This organization was a complete dumpster fire before Masai Ujiri came. So, obviously other parts had to do with that as well. Kyle Lowry, DeMar DeRozan, all those types of players deserve credit, but Masai Ujiri is a big part of it. So, don't fire Masai. I'm going to be adamant about that, regardless of how many people are calling for him to be moved. But the next thing we're taking a look at, the next thing we're discussing in this video is a potential extension for Gary Trent Jr. mentioned. And went a little bit long there on the Masai Ujiri rant, but felt like I had to because it was some madness. But basically, Gary Trent Jr.'s name did get brought up in a recent podcast, and GTJ got next has been recapping a lot of stuff happening around Raptors land lately, but basically Tim Bontemps and Tim McMahon saying that Toronto Raptors guard Gary Trent Jr. has been extended for 3 years, $60 million. Literally said that exactly on this podcast. We haven't heard that officially reported, as GTJ sort of mentions. May have been mistaking it for something else. Maybe Pirtle's contract is similar to that deal they threw out there. They're mistaken, all that sort of stuff. But we heard on day one of free agency that Gary Trent Jr., a lucrative extension, was coming for Gary Trent Jr., which I imagine means multiple seasons. And if it's a 3-year, $60 million deal, right, and just the info hasn't been made public yet, or they're waiting for a potential trade to go down, whatever the heck it is, that will be a really good contract. That would be a really, really solid contract for Gary Trent Jr. I believe these are his stats. 17 points per game, 37% from the three-point line, potentially taking a leap next season, as we discussed in the last video. Right under Darko Rajakovic's new system, Gary Trent Jr. could break out, and having him under contract, especially with the growing cap, that could be a huge W for the Toronto Raptors. So I'm hoping that deal is correct, hoping the reporting on there is all good. So we'll see what happens along those lines. Nothing guaranteed, but that's a name that was mentioned on a report. The final thing we're discussing in this video is Gradey Dick getting sponsored, as the Rook is coming in. He's got the flamboyant suit. He's out here cooking in Summer League. We'll make a full video on his Summer League performances. But basically, Gradey Dick, he's gotten a contract with Adidas. So, just wanted to say a shout out to Gradey Dick. Congrats on the sponsorship, all that type of stuff. And just want to ask you guys, what would you be naming the Gradey Dick shoes? Throw them down, throw those comments down below. But, I'd be buying some Gradey Dick shoes once he becomes a star in the league. But you guys are the best for making this far. Subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already. We're very, very close to 29,000 subs. So, if you made it this far, you love Toronto Raptors content, hit the sub button. It means the world to me. Anyways, I'm signing out. Cheers.